Welcome to this week's podcast. I realized as I was sitting down to record this week that most of this podcast is just going to be stories I'm telling, but let's be honest, that's probably all of the podcasts I do, all of the sermons I ever do are just random stories. As I meet with leaders and talk with leaders and train leaders, and I could probably just say this, I guess, across the board with just people in general, especially because I believe that everyone is called to lead at some capacity. I think one of the greatest gifts a leader can possess is the gift of awareness. We talked on one of the episodes about being self-aware, but I think that just being aware in general is one of the greatest gifts, one of the greatest skill sets that you can have as a leader. And that ultimately I have to be aware of things that are happening. I have to be aware of myself. I have to be aware of others. I have to be aware of culture. I have to be aware of dynamics and team. And I have to be aware of what God's doing. I have to be aware. And I think so many people just kind of put their head down. They're not aware. But one of the things that I really believe we are maybe the most unaware about is our internal emotional world. Let me say that again. I think one of the areas that we seem to lack the most awareness of is around what is happening internally or what's happening with our emotional world. I mentioned Danny Silk quite a bit on here. Danny and Sherry Silk moved when we came down to plant. They were on staff at Bethel and moved with us. But Danny was my boss for years at Bethel. And when I was youth pastoring, I was underneath him, and then Sherry is on staff with us. Both of them are part of the executive team here. But Danny has been one of the biggest influences for me in just the kind of development of my internal world and emotional life and all that type of stuff. And I remember I would sit in Danny's office, and I'll tell you this right off the bat. I was not raised, and I love my parents, and my parents are awesome. We're very connected. I had a great childhood, but I wasn't necessarily raised in an environment where you were emotionally aware. Like I didn't know what was going on inside of me, and I didn't know what was going on inside of other people, and we just weren't in tune necessarily with our emotions. And I remember Danny sitting me down one time, just asking me. He's like, we were trying to figure out how I was responding to stuff. He's like, well, what do you do when you're sad? What do you do when you're mad? What do you do when you feel overwhelmed? What do you do when you feel stuck? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm not even sure I know when those things are happening. Like, I think in order for me to know what I do in response to those, I would first have to know that that's even how I feel. I think that, we've been married 26 years, and my wife is very in tune emotionally. She's very in tune with what's going on inside of her, and she connects brilliantly emotionally. It's amazing how God brings certain people together. I'm like, I don't really, I didn't really know how to connect emotionally, and she knows how to do it. Amazing. And so I remember she's like, I want to know what's going on inside of you. I want to know what's happening inside of you. And the joke I would always tell when I'm preaching or whatever is like, hey, listen, I'm not like withholding information from you. It's not like, I told CJ, it's not like, I know exactly what's happening inside of me and I'm not sharing that with you. I'm like, I have no clue what's going on inside of me. And I would joke with her. I'm like, listen, the minute I figure it out, you'll be the first one to know. I'm not withholding information. I don't know if I have that information. I just want to know what's going on inside of you, Benny. What's happening inside of you? How are you feeling? How do I know how I'm feeling? I don't know how I'm feeling. But listen, if I ever figure out how I'm feeling, I'm going to be you're going to be the first one I call, and I'm going to let you know how I'm feeling. I'm not withholding information from you. That was always kind of the conversation, the joke around that. But I think that, listen, we know this. This is common sense. This is elementary. What's happening internally in your life, what's happening emotionally in your life is affecting the rest of your life. To act like somehow you've got something going on internally and it's not affecting anything else just isn't accurate. What's happening inside of me is how I approach situations. It affects how I approach situations. It affects how I view things. It's so much of, listen, if you pastor people, you walk with people, you would know this. So much of unhealthy coping mechanisms across the board, whether it's porn, whether it's overeating, whether it's working out too much, whether it's you just go down the list of things that people have kind of put in their life that are these coping mechanisms that are unhealthy, that are actually hurting them, not helping them. So many of those things are just people's kind of response to something that's going on inside of them that they don't even know is going on inside of them. That they're just unaware that they're mad, that they feel overwhelmed, that they're sad, that they feel powerless or whatever else. And so they're just trying to escape that thing or whatever else, rather than just recognizing, oh, I have something going on inside of me. What is that, and what do I do about it? And I think that one of the reasons why I wanted to have this conversation today is, and I'm just going to speak for me. I know that not everybody either grew up like me, or not everybody is wired like me, or even just culturally, those who are listening around the world. There's different cultures that we grow up in. But for me, like I said, I was raised in an environment that wasn't necessarily connected emotionally or aware of that type of stuff. But also, growing up, I was raised in sports. So as athletes, what's valued is that you push through. You push through discomfort. You play through pain. You want to be out there. We're competitive. You want to get this stuff done. In fact, the stories I told you I was going to tell a bunch of stories, but like I have a value system inside of me that's like, suck it up and get out there and play. Well, I'm tired. I'm uncomfortable. Doesn't matter. Get out there. Sprain my ankle. Doesn't matter. Like, this is just how we are raised. I'm not even saying this is healthy, everybody, for all the people all the non-athletes that are judging me right now. You think you're judging me right now? Wait till I tell you these stories. My son, who's a senior in high school, he's 18. He's been playing basketball and sports his whole life. And I remember one time, this is the difference between dads and moms of, athletes, at least when they're little. I think my son was probably in 6th grade or something, and he's playing in this basketball game. And I'm sitting next to these dads. We're all sitting up there watching our sons play. And one of the boys went down. I don't know. He fell down. He was kind of holding his ankle or something. And we're all sitting up there, just our arms crossed, looking down there, not reacting. And the moms are all like, oh, no, is he okay? What's going on? And then all of a sudden, the dad who's sitting next to me of the kid who fell, he just yells, get up. That's what he yells from the stands. No empathy, no compassion, just get up. I looked over and I thought, there you go. That's a dad I can hang around with. That's a dad I can respect. Like, get up. We don't have time to be rolling around on the ground. Like, and I remember my son, he was playing this a couple years later, still in middle school, right? He's in 8th grade. He's playing for his school ball, which school ball around here in 8th grade was kind of just more just for fun. It wasn't real serious. But they're playing a game, and one of the kids on our team went over to the coach. He was in the game playing, went over to the coach and asked to be subbed out because he was tired. He wanted to be subbed out. I was sitting in the stands mortified. I was sitting in the stands embarrassed for whoever's for whoever the father was of that son, whose son was asking to come out of a game because he was tired. I drove my son home that night. He's never done this before, ever, so I don't have much to worry about, but I had to make sure, I had to clarify, had to reiterate with him, make sure that he knows in the Leapshire household what the rules are. I drove him home and I said, Lake, if you ever ask to come out of a game, if you ever come over to a coach and say, take me out, I said, son, listen, if you ever embarrass the Leapshire name like that, I said, if you come out of a game, it's because you broke a leg, and I better see a bone sticking out of your leg that proves to me you actually broke your leg if you're going to ask to come out of a game. Don't ever embarrass me like that. Now, of course, we're being sarcastic, and all of you people that are judging me right now, I'm not saying it's healthy. I'm not saying my parenting is healthy, okay? But this is kind of how we were raised. If you're an athlete, and if you know this, if you're an athlete, you play through pain, you suck it up, you do whatever it takes, you want to be out there in the field, and you ignore a whole lot of stuff to make that happen. And you could talk to every pro athlete that's, that has retired now, and they're like, oh, I just played through a bunch of injuries my whole entire career, and it costs them later, but they're going to do whatever it takes to stay on the field. So I know we joke about this. I know I'm actually not being sarcastic about how we do it, but I know that we're talking through this, but here's the reality, guys. The problem is that for so many of us, we take that mentality and just kind of bring it into our emotional, mental, spiritual worlds. When it comes to our internal world, our emotions, we've got things going on. Somebody hurt us. Somebody betrayed us. We went through a loss. Things aren't working out like we thought. We're disappointed. We're mad. But instead of stopping long enough to pay attention and take inventory, we just suck it up. We just play through it. We ignore it. We act like it's not there. For many people, we don't know what to do with it. So recognizing it, what are we going to do with it? And we just move on. And I think I think it's hurting a lot of people. I think a lot of people's problems in life are just connected to they don't know emotionally what's going on inside of them, and so they don't know how to address it. They don't know what to do with it. They don't know how to walk things out in a healthy way, and so they're going to walk it out, but most of the time they're just walking it out in an unhealthy way that's hurting them, not helping them. Let me say this real quick. You've got to stop long enough to take inventory of what's going on inside of you. You got to pay attention to your internal world. Now, again, I may only be talking to myself and my personality and those that were raised in sports and athletes or homes that didn't know how to take emotional inventory. But it's interesting with all the people I've worked with. This is a big one. They just don't know what's going on inside of them, and so they don't stop long enough to take inventory. I'll give you another Danny story. Danny was in the office with me at one time, and when we were having that conversation around, well, what do you do when you're mad? What do you do when you're sad? What do you do when you feel overwhelmed? What do you do when you feel powerless? What do you do when you feel stuck? What do you do when you feel hurt? And, my answer was, I don't know. I'd have to actually recognize that that's how I feel before I could tell you what I do in response to those things. But he asked me, he said, he knows that I understand sports. So he said, Benny, let me ask you this. He says, if you sprain your ankle on the court, what do you do? What's the first thing you do? And I'm, if you know Danny at all, Danny has a way of asking questions that you're like, I should be able to answer this, but I feel like any answer I say is going to be wrong. So he said, what do you do? I'm like, you tape it up. He goes, no. I'm like, give yourself a shot. No. Like I couldn't come up with the answer. And he finally just said, Benny, you take yourself out of the game. You take yourself out of the game so you can assess the situation, so you can figure out what's going on. And I'm like, well, yeah, I guess if you're a sissy, that's what you do, But I it was just that simple. Like sometimes what we have to do is just recognize something's going on inside of me. Something's going on inside of me. And it's going to be leaking out. It's going to be affecting the world around me. I have to stop for a moment. I have to stop and go, what's going on inside of me? I remember we went through a tough time. Chris Kilala had just lost his boy, and it was emotional. It was so rough. It was just a really, really rough season. And walking with people that we just love so dearly in that family, just them going through what's just every parent's worst nightmare, And I remember we had just gotten done with the memorial service, and I went to I was working again sports. I was volunteering at my daughter's school to run the clock for this tournament. It was freshman girls, and I remember that this is gonna be so random. I'm telling you this story. It wasn't even in my notes, but I remember that this coach for a freshman girls game was like still pressing the other team when they were up by like 50 points or something. I don't know. They were up by so much. They were still pressing. And I was just sitting there so irritated, so annoyed. I finally, at the score table, just said something to the coach. I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you pressing these girls? These are 14-year-old girls. And he's like, I don't know. He got mad at me about something. But I realized, like, oh, I am emotionally drained. I'm emotionally exhausted. I feel sad. I feel all the stuff that I was going through in walking with this family that we love so dearly, and it's just leaking out everywhere. It's just the response was because I just didn't stop to go, oh, I've got something going on inside of me, and I need to pay attention to that. The story we tell and the title for this podcast is Check Under Your House, because we bought our house a few years ago, and we live in a town called El Dorado Hills. So you can imagine the whole town is on hills. And so, our street is on a hill, but so our house, in order to make it flat, um, half of our house is on a concrete foundation. The other half is on a raised wooden foundation. So we bought this house from a great family, and they were the original owners, had lived there for 26 years. And whenever you buy a house, there's an inspection that happens. So an inspector comes in, and the inspector comes back and said, well, the house is fine, but there's one major problem, that the wood foundation underneath half of the house is completely rotted out. It's complete dry rot, the whole thing. They said, we don't even know how the house is still standing, besides maybe the stucco walls are keeping it up. And in 26 years, because there wasn't good ventilation, the water would sit under the house, and in 26 years, the owners had never checked under their house to see if it was good or not. Now, to be fair, I wouldn't have either. I wouldn't have thought to go check under the house to make sure it's not dry rot or there's good ventilation or there's whatever else. And it costs quite a bit of money to get that fixed and all that. But this would be I would just say, guys, you have to stop long enough. You've got to regularly stop and say, I need to check under my house. I need to check my internal world. I need to make sure, how am I doing? Has something happened that's made me sad? Has something happened that's made me mad? Is there something going on that's unresolved? Is there something going on that I'm not actually paying attention to, that I'm not recognizing, but it is leaking out and affecting my life? Now, a lot of people might say, well, I don't even know how to do that. And I would just give you two quick. One is just start paying attention and you'll get better at it. I will say that. Sometimes just going like, oh, I need to know. Do I feel mad? Do I feel sad? Do I feel... But the other thing is just two quick things for you. One is this: just get with God. In prayer, inquire of the Lord. Search me and know me. We're asking God to search me and to know me. I reference the scripture right there, so that's why this podcast is now official. But it's like, search me and know me, that God, is there anything going on that I need to be aware of internally, that I need you to come and just deal with internally, or I need to bring to you? I remember, this is not too long ago, but we were coming out of a stressful season. I just felt internally tired. I didn't know why. I couldn't quite figure it out. But I remember just in prayer one time, just praying, and the Lord just said, Banning, it's not stress that you're carrying, it's grief. Well, all of a sudden, when the Lord told me that changed a bunch for me. I'm like, oh, what's going on inside of me is grief that I haven't dealt with. There's been real loss in the last few years, and I have to be able to walk out grief. But if I don't see that it's grief, if I'm ignoring it, if I'm acting like it's not there, if I'm just sucking it up and moving on and playing through pain, or I just am completely unaware at all, then that is absolutely affecting my life. But when he said, hey, Benny, it's not stress, it's grief, well, then all of a sudden I was like, oh, okay. Honestly, when I found out it was grief, I did the next thing, which is I began to talk to people. So I'd say get with God, but then talk to people. I called a friend who'd walked through some stuff and said, hey, tell me how you walked through it. Tell me what you learned from grief. What's going on with that? He walked me through. He sent me a bunch of notes. It was really beautiful about kind of this. I called another friend. Hey, you've walked through some loss. Tell me about how you got through that. What's grief look like? And all these people I went, they kind of recommended books. I went and got 3 or 4 books on the subject and just began to say, oh, I've got something emotionally happening inside of me. I don't want to ignore it, because if I do, I'm going to be like these homeowners that 26 years later go, oh my gosh, the entire foundation is rotten because I just haven't taken time to pay attention and to give it the care that it needs. to be able to bring it before the Lord. If I feel betrayed, if I feel grieved, if I feel mad, if I feel overwhelmed, if I feel stuck, whatever else it is that I'm bringing, that I'm not ignoring it, I'm not moving past it, I'm not sucking it up. I'm actually bringing it before the Lord, and I'm just processing with people as well what's going on, because I want the Lord. I want to be able to handle those things. I want my emotions to be in a healthy place. So, guys, check under your house. I know it's a simple illustration with that, but check under your house. Are you aware of what's happening emotionally, and are you actually walking towards it in a healthy way?